All right. I guess the first thing to address is any questions about the assignment, lesson plan number 1. Concerns, issues.
With the, I kind of missed out on that one before we do that classroom. With the critical thinking piece, are those like critical thinking questions that are found in our lesson?
On the reflection?
No.
Or on the actual lesson plan?
On the lesson plan.
Does it just ask you for critical thinking?
Yeah, like critical thinking.
I just
orange.
put like higher order questions.
Yeah,
or
what- how-
my kids did to make
Yeah.
them think critically.
Yeah, that's what I put. I just put like 4 higher level
Thinking questions?
Yeah.
Okay. I can double check it. But yeah, that is what would make sense.
I looked at a couple examples online. I just like that.
Well, and a lot of what you see is, what I see.
Mhm.
So, and you have access to everything, of course, on the website. But I will double check and verify if the critical thinking, if they're asking for how you critical think or an example. Is that what you're asking me?
Yeah,
How you
like how
utilize
they
it?
would be critical thinking.
You might have already said it, but we're like for the ELP standards, where do we look for that?
In the first week's presentation, or week 3 and 4 presentation, I know it's not really easy to access, but in the PowerPoint, there's actually a link for.
Okay, you just find them online.
I bookmarked them.
Yeah, you
Google
can.
ELP standards.
Well, there's a one on Kansas Department.
If you go to the Kansas Department of Education, but if you go into the, if you go into this PowerPoint, which is week 3 and 4, which would have been the last week,
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure it's in this one. If you open that, it has the link for lesson prep, content objectives. Yeah. Oops.
Okay, I got you.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. They are,
I just sent her the link, so.
okay.
Oh, yeah.
Do you grade these?
The lesson plans?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, that was a weird question. I didn't know if they went to someone like.
No, they go to me. That's why, the questions you're asking, I want to verify. That way I can make sure I am telling you the correct thing so that because all they give me is the rubric to grade off of. I mean, the rubric that you guys have in your
Yeah.
syllabus,
Yeah.
that's
I
pretty
feel like
much
it's not
it.
super specific.
No,
either.
it's not. And nothing in any of these classes will be. So it's very much open to interpretation. If you're questioning, as long as you, I don't want to say justify, because that makes it sound like what you're doing has to be justified to me, but as long as I understand what you're doing,
Yeah.
I mean, especially with this, is in terms of methods, this is just helping give you strategies to teach your L's. So, how are you making your L's think higher level, critical thinking, higher level questions, talking about balloons and costas, and I know at first grade, that's going to look a lot different than as a high school kid when you're asking them to analyze something. But, maybe today's lesson will help clarify a little bit, but I will double check and verify. Because ultimately, everything we do is building up to that reflection piece at the end.
Just when I went to Wichita State, there was a whole bunch of criteria on those lesson plans. I just wanted to make
Oh,
sure.
no. Yep, no, what you see is, and they've done that, I think, probably, the way this class is set up, the way that this program is set up, it's set up to teach to teachers, where Wichita State, you're getting it as you're going through the teaching program. So they're assuming that you've had enough experience in the classroom that they want you to be able to utilize what you've already done / learned this just becomes then a support. Versus Wichita State's, obviously, you have a lot of people who they've never taught before, so the expectation is they need a lot more support than, so that is why. And if you go on to do the masters, it's the same thing, that it's very open-ended, which makes me anxious a lot of times. I would prefer the structure, but of course, if you ever have questions or concerns, ask, and I will, like I said, I will double check that. Yeah, you're fine. So we're not going to do the quick write, but I would like for you to think about when you introduce new vocabulary, what's it look like? I know on the discussion board, a lot of you addressed vocabulary. This is one thing. As a school, I know North, vocabulary is huge. They want us using specific strategies. We use the vocabulary awareness chart. We use the KWL. We use, we've used lots of them in the past, but how do you introduce vocabulary?
We, in elementary, we're supposed to use like Anita Archer stuff a lot, where you just introduce the word, right? Yeah.
Well, we've used dots.
This is Anita.
Dots. Do you know what dots worksheets are? Yeah. And so, like, I'll show them a picture, and whatever comes to mind, we'll write down on our dots chart, and then we'll go back and connect the vocabulary words to what they wrote.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't do that in 5th grade, because our vocabulary words, a lot of them you can't find pictures for,
Right.
or something that would even like.
And we pick our own vocabulary words because
Oh, true. Yeah.
we don't like what Anita Archer or whatever was given to us. We just don't.
Yeah.
Realize them.
We nix some of the text too. Like,
And I was gonna say I do Journey, so I don't get that option, because we're piloting, so we don't get the option to.
With newcomers and transitioning kids, DOTS is awesome. That's one of the strategies that we talk about at our ESOL in services. We're going to do, I'm going to show you another chart that's kind of similar to DOTS. In terms of like, it's got the boxes and you plug your words in. And so we'll talk about that in a little bit. What else do you guys, or how do you continue to incorporate it? Are you intentionally, once you've introduced, are you intentionally using that vocabulary again? I know for me, I don't know, Mr. Hassel, for social studies it's easy because the words that I'm picking for vocab are words that we're going to be talking about. So it feels, I don't know if it's intentional as it could be, but when you're building vocabulary, how do you guys continue to utilize it?
I have a small group center.
Mhm.
I mean, in high school, I know you guys don't get the option of typically doing small group rotations or whatever, but that's how I do it in elementary. And there's a station that they do vocabulary work. They write a journal entry using X amount of vocabulary words. They draw a picture. They do all these different things with it, and then I use it in just everyday talking. Like we had a fire alarm today, and one of our vocab words is piercing. So we talked about just that connection real quick as we were walking out for our fire drill. And so just some of that, bringing it back when an example happens in every day.
How about other high school guys?
I have a word wall, so like every time we add a vocab word to the word wall, we put it up there, and then like a lot of times I'll be like, oh, what's this word? It's on our word wall, and then that can kind of remind them like how to do it, and it's just dry erase behind my desk, so it's really easy to see.
yeah, I have a word wall too. And like each word for me, like I have pictures next to it too.
That's huge.
And I just like, I don't even have like a vocabulary station half the time. Like the time that we have, like we're just so focused on just being able to see it within the text and be able to read it. But I have a lot of time, like I'll make a point of trying to use it like that week or something, and then praise the kids that use it. And
I know we used to have like a word of the week or something, or word of the day, And if somebody caught you using the word of the day, you got a candy bar, you got something like that. And it was trying to incorporate more of that academic vocabulary, which I think is the one thing that our kids struggle with as well. Content-specific vocabulary we talked about last time is easier because they're using it obviously in context with something. I think some of the academic vocabulary that they're going to see on state tests are what they struggle with a lot when they're asked to analyze something, or they're asked to, what does it mean to evaluate something? What does it mean to, when they're asking to look for similarities and differences? We talk about these things, and I think a lot of times we expect them to know it, but I know with just giving my kids simple primary source activities where you give them 2 quotes and you ask them to compare and contrast, and they'll list all the things that are the same, but they can't explain how it's different. Or they'll tell you, I love when you just get like a summary of what they just read. I can read it. I don't need you to summarize it for me. I need you to tell me how it's similar or different. So I think sometimes they don't read the instructions, which I think is legitimate too. Sometimes they just don't read.
They don't read to understand.
Yeah, they just bring it to you, what am I supposed to do? I'm like, there's a whole sentence at the top of the paper that will tell you exactly what to do if you just read it. And it's probably on the overhead too. But so building vocabulary, that's what we're going to talk about today. I love Calvin and Hobbes, so I thought it was appropriate that he was on here. Today, for show and tell, I brought in some flashcards I made. Each card has a letter followed by several dashes. When I show you the card, you yell the vulgar, obscene, or blasphemous word they stand for. Ready? She's such a hypocrite about building vocabulary. Sometimes, especially with our L's, if they have the academic language in their native language, build on that. It's okay to praise them. It's okay to ask them, is this a cognate? Is this how do you say this in Spanish? And praise them for it. Because if they've got the vocabulary, you want to give them kudos for the vocabulary.
So it had to happen today. Somebody's like, no, this is the word in Spanish, and it had it on the vocab card. And one of my sped boys was like, oh, that makes sense now.
Yeah.
I was like, okay.
I had the same experience today where my tier 3 class is actually starting the lesson that I'm working on, and I have out of my 9 kids, 8 of them are ELLs, and I finally just looked at this boy and I go, what is this word in Spanish? And he rattled it off, and of course I was like, and the kid was like, oh. Why didn't you just say that, miss? And I go, if I could,
Yeah,
I would.
I don't know the Spanish word for it. But yes. But that's exactly right. So, build on what they've got. And it's with subs, like I have to literally leave notes for my subs. These students are learning English. They will speak in Spanish. Any adult that takes a second and watch their body language will know if they're speaking about the appropriate thing. You can watch them. You can tell, even if you can't speak Spanish, if they're talking about what they should be talking about. So you don't have to tell them to stop speaking Spanish if you can tell. I think some people just get flustered by it. They think they're talking about them. And I sometimes want to tell my subs the same thing I tell my kids. Don't flatter yourself. You're not the only thing in the room. You're probably not even something that's on their radar. So, it's okay to realign them, encourage them, ask them, how do you say that in English? But we want them to utilize that academic language. And if they're scared to speak in their native language, you may never find out what kind of academic language they have. All right, understanding academic vocabulary. I'm learning this myself, just teaching the newcomers. As we do a unit, they'll tell me a word that we've been talking about, and I have to be told 3 or 4 or 5 times, how do you say that again in Spanish, just so I can remember. So even as an adult, I'm learning that, those encounters with those words are very, very important, and use them over and over and over again. I used to be really good at it when I was trying to teach academic language to natives, just to native speakers. You find a word that you really like and you just keep utilizing it. You got to do that with these L's. There are more levels of knowing a word. So you can label the word, make connections with the words, find related words. That's really, I think, critical, because a lot of times they may know something similar. We were talking about voyage today. What's a voyage? A voyage, and I'm like, you watch Star Trek? They laughed at me. But to travel, to go somewhere, to go, and so they made that connection to voyage. Careful with words that have multiple meanings, because they'll go through and check them. When they say a word, you mean something, and they'll go, oh, yeah, that's it. Check them and make sure that they've got the correct cognate, too, because I've caught them. We were talking about allowed. What does it mean to allow today? We were talking about Ellis Island and how immigrants were, once they passed through Ellis Island and they passed all their inspections, they were allowed to become citizens. And so we talked about allowed, and I translated it to make sure I knew what it was, and I could hear them talking about it, and one of them said something and it wasn't the correct, allowed. And so do kind of keep an ear if they do that, because I would just, I'm sure you're right, it sounds right. You look like you know what you're talking about, but just make sure that they are using it. Exposure is necessary, but not just exposure alone. So just giving the word, we know that. We know that with our regular kids. You can't just give them a word and a definition and expect them to learn it. You can't just give them a word and a definition and a vocabulary test and expect them to learn it. They've got to do something with it. And again, building up that with your L's is critical. Multiple meanings and how words transform word families. Says last two bullets are supported by research. So word families are huge. I see those a lot of times. You see them when in the foreign language classes, they'll do word families. It works opposite to a certain extent as well. We aren't teaching the same way they are, but sophisticated vocabulary. This, if we had time, we'd spend some more time. They suggest doing this activity with us, Showdown. Have you ever used Showdown in your classes with vocabulary words?
Is it an application?
It's like a Kagan strategy.
Oh, where they just show the answer?
Yeah, basically. You do it on your smart board or your whiteboard, or just on a piece of paper, Okay. With close activities, which that's this is obviously, anybody interested in Showdown? Everybody knows how to do Showdown. Anybody? I looked out the Kagan book today so I could.
Does it have examples of ways to use it?
It just gives kind of steps for the strategy and alternate usages. Kagan was huge in this building for about 5 minutes a few years ago, and so you still see him pop up. So using Showdown, right? So you've got your words at the bottom, which, sorry, they're hard to read. So you could utilize a close activity with this, where you have the students obviously fill in the best word, the word that fits the best. Vocabulary instruction must occur through frequent reading and writing activities. And so with the Showdown, everybody's sitting in a circle or everybody's sitting around. They've got their little smart board. Or what I like about these desks, I don't know if you guys have them, you can actually draw on them. Yeah, you can write on them. And so you can write on them and you don't have to use the smart boards or the whiteboards. And they have them at the PTR. They've got the little paddles now. I love those too because the kids like to bid on things. But this is a great thing. You can have them do different activities if you go through. Now, close activities, creating close activities should be like there's a set way to do it. You don't want to just pick random words out. This took me a while to figure out like the best words to pick. Obviously, if you've got 5 vocabulary words, pull those out. If you've got specific content words, you can pull them out. They strongly urge you not to pull the first word out because that's kind of hard to predict. They should be similar but not obvious. Any questions? Okay. That's the Anita Archer that one she's huge on the close reading, right? I always felt, I won't say what I thought when she does her. I've only got to listen to her once. Practical guidelines for education of English language learners. When vocabulary instruction does occur, it often revolves around the definition of a particular word. We are all guilty of this. Either by presenting the word in a sentence that provides one of its meanings or by having students look up its meaning in the glossary or dictionary. This is probably how you learned vocabulary. For many older learners, the focus is on words highlighted in the textbook. Those are the bold-faced words. These word lists are often filled with rare and unusual words. They're not necessarily the most important things for them to know. And it's distracting. That's why I struggle with textbooks. Because sometimes the words that they boldface are important words. Sometimes they boldface stuff and you're like, the kids are like, why is this word bold? Why? And they just hone right in on that word. Not important. Don't worry about that word. It's just colored pretty. So, remember we talked about last time, make sure that the vocabulary, is it important that they know, right? For some of these, like with dandelion, how easy would it just be to put a picture of a dandelion there instead of having dandelion, a flower that is yellow, blah, 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 blah. Then they get wrapped up in trying to understand the definition because, again, we're translating everything. So some of these things, would it really matter? Could you just say flower? Great resources for for vocabulary. Check your school libraries. If you have an ESOL program, you more than likely have all of these books already in your school library, in your staff library. Does everybody here know where the library is? In the library, if you go
Temple room, right?
Yeah, in the where the workroom is, where Penny and Janet's workroom is. In there, if you walk in and turn left, there's shelves, and a lot of these resources are already there. If there's a resource that you come across that we don't have here, let me know, and I can definitely get my hands on it. Probably. And those of you at other buildings, check, because I'm guessing all of these resources are available. Dots. Determine, observe, talk, and summarize. Excuse me. Any questions? Has everyone seen dots or used dots at some point in their educational, either their education or since you've been teaching? No. I thought there was actually an example. We did one at our last in-service. Did you guys do it in the morning, the dots?
Yeah, we did.
Okay. I thought they gave us an example. So, what I know, so you'd have, I wish I had a copy of it, the chart. Does it have a fixed number of, is the matrix a fixed number? Does it matter?
It's just like one box of like A-B.
Is that all it is?
C-D.
So it looks just like this.
Yeah.
Okay.
We
Okay.
did that in service.
Yeah, and I got copies of it too for you. We did something different at our ESOL one. It looked different than this, I thought. No, it's the same thing, isn't it? Was this what we did at our ESOL?
it
Never
was
mind.
the same
I'm
job.
getting. You want a blank copy?
Good job, David.
Sorry. I always called it the A to Z chart, or the ABC chart.
Yeah, because there's no dots.
Did you want?
Oh, we did this at PL, that's what it was.
Yeah.
It was PL, not.
Did we do it this year? Because I know I did it last year. Marta did it last year with us on something. Was
I
it?
know at PL this year we
Had one? Okay.
Yeah.
So you have your topic. The point is to bring you back to the vocabulary. I mean, ultimately. So you come up with your whatever your lesson is. Have the students name as many things as they can about the particular topic. I'm trying to remember what we did ours over last year. There were words, but I can't remember what. Vocabulary, obviously. I can't remember what the topic was off the top of my head. So you put them in into their chart about what they know about whatever it is. Vocabulary specific, content specific. The nice thing about this, especially with your L's, is it's okay for them to write it in their native language, because ultimately you're just trying to get them to pull as much background knowledge as they possibly can. So if it's in their native language, it's not going to hurt anything. So around the outside, you're going to write your targeted vocabulary as you're introducing the topic, the content. Okay. Make associations with the words inside the chart with those outside the chart. So how can they connect the vocabulary that you're specifically giving them? I mean, kudos to them if they have words that are the same, because, right, that's going to also tell you how much content time you have to spend on content vocabulary. So they're making those associations. Have them talk to each other. They can add to their boxes. And then after the lesson, and this is really the important part, and this is the part that I always really fail to do, use their chart to do something. Write a summary, write a paragraph, a reflection, give them a fill-in-the-blank reading that they have to utilize their vocabulary to fill in. But the going back again and being intentional, intentionally using, is really, really important. But DOTS, especially with ESL, you're going to see this is a strategy that's strongly encouraged. Questions? Anything that you guys would add to DOTS? Do you guys use it in any other fashion, or add anything, or something that you don't do? No?
I used it kind of as a like a final in one of my classes. I wanted them to write down one thing for each box about what they learned during the whole unit that we covered.
There you go.
And I have my kids, like, the partner, whenever, if they share a word with a partner, write it in like a different color.
Oh, yeah.
So then when they turn it in, I know if it was their word or a partner's word, so then again, that kind of helps me gauge on.
What they
Because if
know.
it's all filled with red and they were supposed to write theirs in blue, then that tells me they knew nothing, but
Right.
they built background from partners.
I mean, there's tons of stuff you could add to. I mean, you can have them pull it back out the next day. Can you add any new words? Can you make any new connections? And it depends on, is it content specific? Like, are you talking specific, about World War I? Or are you talking about something very broad, like, the United States in the 1950s? That's going to give you a very different list of words and connections. And you could broaden it out, or you could narrow it down every day too. Start with something very specific and then work your way out, or start with something very broad and work your way in. So, more instructions. Write 4 ideas related to teaching vocabulary in the boxes, so if we wanted to practice this in class. Share with the partner, adding, and then add lessons, focus words. So my academic language, my academic vocabulary. click to fly in. There is nothing flying in. Academic vocabulary, comprehensive input, scaffolding for HOTS. So, those we're supposed to fly in. Questions? Sorry, I did not prep very well for today because I was so busy trying to figure out my stupid projector.
What's HOTS?
I knew you were gonna ask. HOTS. When did we talk about it last? Okay, I just have to Google. I don't know. Off the top of my head, hang on.
It's okay.
I will come back to it. All right. ELs need comprehensive vocabulary program. Direct versus implicit. Okay. Direct instruction, limited number of words. Your direct instruction, explicit, systematic, occur through oral reading, writing, and activities distributed. So when you're looking at direct instruction, these are the words that you're going to put up on your vocabulary wall. These are the words that are going to be content specific. They have a foundation that they have to be probably built on top of. So if you're talking about geometry, you would have to have had some sort of, right, algebra first. Do you have to have algebra?
Yeah. You don't have to pass it, but.
Okay, but you would have to have that, right? It's not something that, in theory, you would be able to jump right into. You would have to have some sort of foundation for it. Versus the implicit learning. This is what you hope that they're picking up at home. This is what they, if their parents are reading to them, if they just talk to them. That's another thing. Do you have parents who, how do they speak to their children? I mean, you can tell the difference between a kid whose parents talk to them, not as an adult, but just talk to them, versus parents who don't have the time to talk to their children. Just hearing their parents use those words. This is, versus sitting down and listening to someone tell a story, which is, again, huge. Are these the kids that have been read to at night, or bedtime stories? Are they being taken to the library and allowed to listen to people read out loud? Is it a language-rich environment? And this is, again, it could be in their native language or in their second language, where you're going to see those differences. Okay. Teaching word learning strategies. To some extent, this is going to be your, what are they called, little catchphrases that you have to remember things.
Mnemonics?
Yeah, thank you. Mnemonic phrases and things like that, which never worked on me. I still don't know the order of the planets. Doesn't matter how many different variations you can give me on the, right? Those are okay for certain things. I know, I laugh at the AP kids because Mr. Morales has all these little mnemonic triggers for them to remember, the order of the amendments and things like that, which are okay if you already have strong vocabulary skills to begin with. How they learn, if right now we're using the vocabulary awareness chart, word learning strategies, we expect them to know the definition and to have a word or an image that helps them remember. If they have, the know it, don't know it, that in and of itself is a strategy as they're doing their vocabulary. Are they labeling their words as they go? These are words, I can define this one on my own, I can define this in my own words, I know it. Are they keeping track of those words? Are they building their vocabulary? The words that they don't know, are they building onto that vocabulary? And promote word consciousness, making vocabulary fun. Some of this, Kahooting it, you can do games like charades, Scrabble, Pictionary, anything that you're utilizing the vocabulary and you're making because they're going to remember that one time where they do that really great picture and, they got the points for whatever the word was. Being able to connect that to something positive. And I think, are all the Tower Time things just math, literacy games, or are there some, numeracy, or are some of them literacy too?
Some of them are literacy.
Okay. With my kids, I don't use any of them, so that would be, it's intentionally using that vocabulary, whatever the vocabulary happens to be, to, the reading, just exposing them to reading. Dictionary danger. I wish I could take all the dictionaries out of my room. I wish they could use them. That's not true. I wish kids knew how to use a dictionary and not just pick the first, right? Because they go and they pick the very first definition. And even when I do vocabulary activities in my regular content classes, the kids will be like, "Oh, miss, I'll just Google it. It's okay." But the word you Google the definition you Google may not be right. And so, teaching them how to use a dictionary. If you give them a vocabulary word, give them context so that they can compare the dictionary definition to the sentence. Does the dictionary definition that you wrote down make sense in this sentence? Does that make sense? Okay? Because they'll write a definition down for whatever word, and then you'll go back and you'll ask them for the definition. Okay, does that make sense in this sentence? Does the word definition that you have fit? So make sure that they are cognizant of the dictionary can have so many definitions of a word. And even when you just Google Translate, I've found a lot of times too, like I said before, make sure that the word that they're translating it to is the correct word, because a lot of it is an inference you're making, okay? From an inexpensive generic dictionary. B is for ESOL learners, easy descriptions plus examples in use. So, which definition would you give, would you have your students write down? So A, the quality of or state of being delicate, fineness, weakness, sensitivity, etc. 2, a choice of food. B, something good to eat that is expensive or rare. A careful and sensitive way of speaking or behaving so that you do not upset someone.
This is one of our vocabulary words.
Delicacy?
Mm-hmm. It was hard for them because they didn't understand it at all, no matter what I threw at them.
Precious was one that we had.
Yeah,
in
I think
a
it's just
reading.
because they don't get delicacies.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of ours are so, like, I don't know, they're just not able to afford the delicacies. So.
That's true. So part of it's just culture. I mean, not
Yeah.
culture, but socioeconomic.
I mean, it really, because, like, I've had, like, octopus and all these different things, and they're like, no, never.
And yeah, would they even appreciate it?
Yeah.
So, which, if you were sending a kid to the dictionary, and now the like I said, the B dictionary down here is an actual ESOL dictionary versus A. And, if you don't have ESOL or And that does not necessarily mean Spanish to English dictionary either. I mean, that's not necessarily, because if they don't know what the word delicacy means in Spanish, it's not gonna matter.
I think the second would be, like today for my kids, a choice food would have just summed it up, because adding the delicate or weakness, sensitivity, that would have just been too much, when strictly we were looking at a food that was a delicacy.
So these are free online dictionaries. So if you have, a one-to-one classroom, or if you have access, when you're working on vocabulary, you know, instead of having them just Google the word, because they just think Google is the answer to all things, have them actually utilize one of these. I like the picture dictionary as well. For most things, the pictures are a little, I don't always get the pictures anyway, but I think it does a pretty good job at giving you a little bit of an idea. Okay, direct instruction. Teacher provides student-friendly definitions. Indifferent means not caring or not being interested in something. Guys, it's okay to write your own definitions for words. You know your students' language limits. I rewrite definitions all the time because I want them to know exactly what it is that word is supposed to entail. Teacher provides examples of use. Juan was indifferent about going with his friends, so again, telling them exactly how to use the word in the sentence, and then have them write a sentence. And then you can, again, this helps you understand, do they get it? If they can use the word correctly in a sentence, you will have a better idea as to whether or not they understand. The four corner strategy, it's kind of like, I just lost the strategy.
Freyer.
What's it called?
Freyer model.
Freyer model, yeah, thank you. The thing I like about the Freyer model, do you guys know Freyer model?
Mm-hmm.
The thing I like the most about the Freyer model is the opposite, or the,
Counterexample.
yes. Some words, it's important that they be able to tell you what it's not. Because again, sometimes the cognates get a little fuzzy, a little gray, and so they may think they understand based on what they understand the cognate to mean, but the cognate may not always translate directly. So make sure I think the non-example helps narrow down the definition for them. And illustration, I've had debates with teachers about what an illustration really is. For my Spanish speakers, an illustration, I am okay with them if they know what the word actually means in Spanish, writing the translation. But you have to make sure that they have the word right. They can draw, obviously you want them to draw a picture, you want them to draw something or illustrate it in a way that they can connect, because that's what we're wanting them to do. But for some of the words, I have no problem letting them write that translation in there. Not the cognate, but what does it actually mean? They can translate it out to Spanish. But everything else, then you would have to make sure that they do in English. So write it in a sentence. What is the definition? And then what's the vocabulary word? Students repeat, 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 repeat. So today they read a story, and then they did a partner, basically an interview based on the story, and so then they had to switch. So having them, what is it the word that you want them, have them say the word out loud. Have them speak. Have them ask questions about the vocabulary that they just defined. Questions about four corners. Again, this is Freyer model. They called it links. I've seen it called links before. This is where you take the note card, right? And on one side you write the word and the definition. On the back side you draw the picture. I mean, they're all variations of the same things. Something for them. You'll see our ESOL kids, the transitioning kids specifically, will walk around with a huge ring of vocabulary words that they just keep adding to their vocabulary list. I don't know how they keep track of them and what words belong to what, but some of them are color coded, I think. But great strategy. Distributed practices. Hang on, let's see how much further. Once you have built a vocabulary list, if you're doing a unit, by semester, by novel, whatever it is, once you've built it, then you want to start breaking the words down and distributing them into different groupings. Categorical knowledge works really well when you have math and science. Social studies, like if you're working with charts or a timeline, I could see maybe. Examples and non-examples, comparing and classifying, maybe if you're looking at two different groups of people. Metaphors and analogies, again, great for English, depending on what you're talking about in social studies, I can see. Going back to the original definitions, think, pair, share. The inner-outer circle, this is something that you definitely want to work with your stronger language learners. You're going to have to be careful with your pairs. You don't want all of your strong language in one group and you're right. You have to be pretty cognizant of your kids' abilities when you're doing inner-outer circle or anything where you're asking them to speak to one another based on what they have acquired. If you're giving them sentence starters, if you're giving them word banks and things like that, that sort of levels the playing field. But I know I've done inner-outer circle with just my transitioning kids, and you can see the strong kids sort of end up in one group, and they do all the talking. So, questions about distributed practices? Do you guys use anything in your classes? Do you, this is something that you have to be kind of intentional about. Once you've got your vocabulary list created, do you go back and, because I, in my regular content, my regular classes, I probably should do a lot better with this. I'm not, I get caught up in the content. I mean, that's my excuse. So, with my ESOL kids, with my newcomers, this is sort of built into the curriculum anyway, but how do you guys, is there anything else that you guys do in terms of building distributed pairs or use your vocab? Good? Sorry. I'll keep moving. I'll let you look. Think, write, pair, share. Again, pulling out the Kagan strategies. Excuse me. This is an example of day 2 after vocab intro, 4 corners. Practice using the vocab that involves connections to background, oral, and written. Partner practice before a whole group. Chance for teachers to monitor during waiting. And partner practice to choose a volunteer for the whole group. So, scientists observe bonding between atoms. Likewise, I observe, so we've got our vocabulary highlighted in our content, academic and content vocabulary highlighted between, so we've got close reading. Atoms, who or that, so what is the correct word? They have to be able to identify, bond to each other with. Scientists observe bonding between atoms. Likewise, I observe bonding between mothers and babies who bond to each other with love. Warm fuzzy, right? Kids would laugh at you. But, just an example, right? How do you see this happening? Does anybody want to write one? Does everybody get the expressions? We're going to move on. Unless anybody wants me to stop. Okay, we'll finish with concept circles. Again, how to utilize our vocabulary. That's what we're doing here, is building vocabulary. Hot.
Higher order thinking skills.
Thank you. Oh my God.
I looked it up, I didn't know it.
Oh, it's like a word we use. I just couldn't think of what the acronym stood for. Students write about words and their relationship to one another. Okay, so I've used this in the past. It's one of those strategies. When I got it, it was great, and we used it a lot. And then life goes on, and you forget about it. So match the words to the definition. So you give them the words, or they can come up with 4 words. So in this case, the topic is imperialism. Dollar diplomacy, economic vulnerable influence. So how you give them your 4 words. How can they use the sentence? Can they use it in a sentence? I've had them do it where I had them write their own definition using the 4 words. Dollar diplomacy was an economic policy used by an imperialist country to influence a vulnerable, smaller country. It gives them the confidence to know that they're using they're using the content vocabulary. They're using a higher level of vocabulary, and they don't have to come up with all the big words on their own. Because sometimes you just give them one word. Like if I said imperialism, and I want you to use the word dollar diplomacy. You may get dollar diplomacy and, is a way to do something in a, this gives them just more, definitely more scaffolding. Definitely something you want to do for them. You can do 2 words. You can do more than 4. We'll come back to that next class. Questions? So we've talked about concept circles, think, write, pair, share, 4 corners, dots, and closed reading. I think everybody uses some form of this. I give my notes in closed reading, basically. I do my PowerPoint, I just copy and paste the outline, I take words out. Otherwise, you can't move fast enough. The kids, for mine, I've learned that if I have them write and then have them write questions, I get a lot more authentic thoughts out of them than having them, because I don't know how, even my higher level kids, I do not know how to get them to take notes without copying straight off the board. I have not found, and it doesn't matter how many times you tell them, because they will still come back their freshman year of college and go, Miss, they don't write everything down on the overhead. They talk through the whole presentation. Or, we're supposed to write stuff that they don't write on the overhead. And I don't...
They just need a whole class on how to take notes.
I guess.
Like even in 5th grade, we have to try and get them ready for middle school by trying to take notes, and it's still just insane.
I'm working with my seniors right now on, there's a Japanese form of like presenting, and all that can be on your PowerPoint is pictures. And then you have to write your speech out. But the PowerPoint is set for every 20 seconds. So it'll change, and you have to change with it. So we're working on, hey, what's important? Where do we fill in this?
Yeah.
Because some of them were like, why can't we just write it on the PowerPoint? It's that's not what we're doing today, thank you.
Right. Well, and it's like, even when I'm doing this, I feel like you guys are adults, you can read what I'm saying. Until I have a brain fart and can't think of what something stands for. But when they write, and if they don't write everything down correctly anyway, then not only do they not have the skill to write down what you said, they don't have the comprehension to write down in their own words what you said. And so then you get done, they're studying their notes, and they're like, Miss, I don't know what you were talking about here. Is this the first time, I want to ask them, is this the first time you've looked back over these notes since, you know?
Some
they
kids
were
write
presented
numbers
to you?
down wrong.
Yes.
Like, they'll write down a 3 instead of 5. And I'm
Yeah.
like, what? That doesn't even look close.
I don't know. Makes me stress. Okay. Were there any questions?
Anything to next week?
Next week.
Looks like it says the partner work on the.
Yep, just the literary. Wait a minute. Is there?
I guess I
No,
should
yeah,
put
the
it
12th.
this.
The 12th is the discussion board and the second lesson plan. So,
Is it just any subject?
what?
Sometimes they can do over
Mm-hmm.
any subject.
Yeah, again, the lesson plans are for you to create the lesson with PSYOP and right in the back of your mind and being intentional about it. The presentation is really the biggest piece here, and that's reflecting on what did you do then, what do you do now, you know, have you made any changes, what changes do you think you still need to make, that kind of thing. I mean, that's the reflection piece is going to be, I think, more critical to you actually applying the methods that you're learning to class on a regular to your how you teach. I'm not speaking very well. I've got a cold. Yes. Are you a reflective practitioner? Do you think about? And we all do. I mean, like I said, a lot of these strategies, like you use these strategies, you're like, I already totally used that strategy at some point in time. That was an awesome strategy. I should use it again, and then you don't think about it again because it's not right in front of you when you get ready to make a plan. You fall back into your old habits. As long as your habits are strong, you know, if you've got strong strategies that are in your arsenal to begin with, it's not a big deal. But that's, you know, are you doing good practice? Good English too, apparently. Not my forte today. So, all right, guys. Hopefully, I'll be back in my own room next week and have time to prep a little bit better.
So do you want me to send over to you?
That's what everybody's like. Oh, I feel like I'm in.
I'm not gonna give much.